Hi! This time I wanted to talk about how to communicate difficulty when it comes to skill checks and also how to communicate hard data through descriptions in tabletop role-playing games. When it comes to skill checks, we have to use, of course, real life as the example. In real life situations, we do not have like a perfect estimation or a way to perfectly perceive the dimensions, the numbers, the factors of everything that involves a skill check as we know it in a tabletop RPG. So, for example, let's take a very simple skill jumping. Jumping can be further developed and trained as a skill. Depending on the RPG system, it could be related to acrobatics, it could be athletics, but you have like a jumping skill almost always. Or some stat that represents jumping. Perhaps proficiencies and such that can enhance our jumping ability. So, for an average person in real life that is somewhat physically fit, jumping across, let's say, 2 feet, it's pretty easy. It's routine. Unless you have some sort of, just like discapacity of sorts, maybe you're overweight or your legs are injured in some way or whatever, you can jump across 2 feet pretty easily. It's a routine task. But when it comes to jumping 4 feet, 4 or 5 feet perhaps, it's normal, it's still doable. Maybe some will need a bit of a running start, just a bit, but they can still achieve it. But when it gets to, let's say, 7 or more feet, 10 feet, 2 meters and such, maybe it's a bit hard, like I said, from the perspective of an average individual that is somewhat physically fit. It's not impossible, it's doable, but beyond that, you need a running start. It's certainly going to be a difficult task to accomplish or check in the case of an RPG. You don't know if you will be able to make it. So when it comes to communicating such things in a tabletop RPG, I usually avoid, in fact, I would say that I always avoid communicating the difficulty number. You know, the typical target number in an RPG, where you have easy tasks at a difficulty of 5, normal at a difficulty of 10, and difficult to when it comes to 15, rolling 15 or above. That's set in stone according to the system. And of course, remember that you should be flexible when it comes to tabletop RPG rules systems. There are many variables, some advantages, disadvantages, and whatnot. Maybe you want to add further granularity to these checks. But let's say that you have that system. I usually don't communicate, again, or rather, I kind of like get the feeling that I have done so, but by remembering, I don't think I've done it in several years. So I do not communicate the difficulty number because it could create a sort of analysis paralysis situation where the player is trying to put everything at his or her disposal to reduce the difficulty or get some bonuses when it comes to the check. So you could say something like, oh, to make that jump, you need to roll 10 or above, normal difficulty of 10. So the player is going to be like, okay, I'm going to remove my jacket to see if that player gets a bonus. Okay, that gives you a +1 bonus. That's it? No, I need to do something else. Okay, let's say I remove this backpack. Okay, this gives you a +3. So it takes so long. It's unnecessary in the sense of stalling the situation. The situation lags. It's much better for the player to immediately carry out his or her description of the character's actions, putting his thoughts on how he can make the skill check easier or how it can potentially become harder. And it also, yes, it creates this situation perhaps that degenerates into a mother may I situation. It's much better to think about things and carry out your actions. Even if you are thinking of role-playing as a character that is quite nervous and wants to put everything at his or her disposal to accomplish tasks, you could say something like my character approaches the gap and he notices that it's 5 meters across. He knows that he can do it, but he's still quite nervous. He starts to remove his his jacket, his backpack, and he starts to prepare for the jump, and he jumps. And then you make the check to see if that character got across. It also depends on the circumstances. What if you are being chased, or you are chasing someone? Suddenly that routine task, jumping across 2 feet, is potentially dangerous. Maybe because you are focusing on the enemy that is chasing you, or you are trying to figure out the best route to make your escape. You stumble and you end up injuring yourself or falling down whatever gap you are trying to jump across. It also depends on that. There are some RPGs that have these tables. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, easy tasks are difficulty 5, normal tasks difficulty 10, difficult tasks difficulty 15, and so forth. So if you want, you could communicate the player that, oh, you see this gap, it's a normal check to get across. But I think it's much better to add some flavor to the description. If it's an easy task, you could say something like, this is a routine jump for you. Or if it's a normal task, you are pretty confident that you can jump across safely. Or if it's a difficult task, you won't be pushing your limits, but it's not going to be that easy to make it across. So, and of course, it's very important to inform the player that the task is impossible. If the player is a normal human and he or she wants to jump across a 40-foot gap, and with no running start whatsoever, no etc., no spell or psionic power, you can inform that player that it's going to be impossible. I think this form of communicating things, like I said, it makes things a bit more agile. It potentially speeds up play. That way the player is not going to be fishing to get the better bonuses or reduce the difficulty. Now, when it comes to informing other factors, other hard data in perhaps combat, this should be handled in a similar way. You are fighting and the opponent perhaps only has 3 hit points left. Instead of informing that, you should describe something like the opponent before you is bleeding out, he can barely stand, so that you are communicating to the player that that enemy is about to topple. Maybe the player gets a horrible roll when it comes to dealing damage, only deals 1 point of damage and the enemy is still standing. That becomes a bit more exciting and more realistic. Like in real life, you cannot scientifically predict that a particular opponent before you is going to fall down after 1 hit, 1 blow to the head, or 1 punch to the stomach. That's it. No, sometimes, especially under the effects of adrenaline, you cannot predict that. There are other factors involved. For example, there are people that could feel too confident that a liver punch is going to immediately down the opponent. What if the opponent has the RH negative factor, that extra rib that provides extra protection? So it's very difficult to predict that. So in combat, it's always a great idea to focus more on description, on how injured or tired the opponent looks. And the players should also be able to use this to their advantage. The non-player characters are also not thinking in game terms. They are thinking as if it was a real-life situation within the fictional environment. Let's say that you finished off a wave of enemies and the reinforcements are coming. Perhaps the fighter of the group wants to keep the attention on himself. He starts to smear or just put some blood of his fallen opponents on his own body, and he starts to pretend that he's injured. Perhaps he is almost dropping his sword, so he stands before the door and he's almost like he looks half dead. So when the opponents rush in, maybe they attack him thinking that he's about to die, and he's fresh, he's actually quite well, and he starts to hack and slash and cut his way through the enemies while getting the attention on himself. Maybe some enemies are quite careless and they think, oh, this guy is about to fall, we can safely run past him and attack the characters behind him. But he, like I said, he's quite capable, quite fresh, still ready to fight for a long time. And he gets some attacks of opportunity as the enemy passed by the enemies because they were careless. They thought that he wouldn't be able to attack at full speed, full power. In the case of maybe you have a illusionist thief in the party, you could create some illusions giving you the appearance that you are very tough and sturdy, like you're the fighter of the group, and you start to move towards the scrawny enemies like, who wants some? You start to chase down the goblins and kobolds and whatnot, and they start to run away because they think that you're the tough guy of the group, but you're the fragile illusionist thief, and you just want to get them away from you as far as possible so you can maneuver with some ranged attacks or spells, etc. So yes, I think it's much better to communicate that hard data through description, narration. Don't tell the players, oh, that enemy has this number of hit points left. Don't tell the players as well when it comes to making skill checks, oh, that is of a normal difficulty to decipher if they are looking through some sort of scroll or text, or if they are trying to figure out how an alien device or vehicle works. Don't tell them, oh, it's a difficulty 5 or difficulty 10. You can tell them something like, the controls are quite similar to a contraption that you saw back home. Or the technology looks very strange. It's unlike anything that you have ever seen before. And that way the player can get a rough estimate of how difficult the check is going to be. So I hope this video was informative and entertaining. Please let me know your thoughts on this difficulty and hard data communication. Do you tell your players the difficulty of the checks? Do you tell the players the number of hit points that are left when it comes to combat and so forth? Let me know. And thank you for watching this video again, and thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.